Hey, Gwilym, how are you, mate?
Very good. What time is it, Lee? You've got a clock?
It's 2:13 according to the little clock that I've got on my computer. Why? Can't you tell the time?
No, it's just wondering how often you look at it. That's all. Just out of interest, asking for some podcast guests.
Are you kind of alluding to something?
It's happened to us all. It's happened to us all. Do you know what it is? It's because you're still on Greek time.
I am still on Greek time. Yeah, I'm still on holiday time. It's although not on holiday weather, unfortunately.
No, 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 no. How was the holiday? We haven't spoken since you had
I
your holiday.
know I missed the last podcast, didn't I? It was it was good. We were in Crete, which is somewhere we've not been to for about 20 years, so it was lovely to go back. Over the south side, so away from kind of busy airports and big towns, and a little place called Plakias, which was lovely. Don't think it got below about 35 degrees during the day, and I don't think it got below like high 20s of an evening. Yeah, it was highly recommended. Take a holiday, mate.
And you got a lot of guilty pleasure out of having no power, as I
No
remember.
power. I know we had 2 or 3 days when there were power outages because of the temperature, and of course that meant Wi-Fi went down and everything like that. It was absolutely dreadful.
You love.
I did love it. Absolutely loved it. Yeah, and my wife and the two girls and the drag along boyfriend that we tend to have with us didn't enjoy it so much. But
And dragged a boyfriend along. Is that
no, Anne didn't drag her
right?
boyfriend
Right.
along. Our eldest daughter Thea dragged her boyfriend Kyle along. He's a lovely lad, but he's a lovely lad. But he's sort of 19 and he's just finished his apprenticeship as a tiler and he's kind of really into his tile. He's a really, really great kind of ceramic tiler. But it does mean that when you're on holiday with someone, all you're permanently having done is the quality of the tiling pointed out to you. I could have murdered him after about day three.
I love that. Good on him. Good
Yeah.
on him.
Can
Go on.
you see those joints? No, shut up.
Did you go straight back at him with the plumbing? Come on.
No, I'm too old in the tooth to do the plumbing stuff.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Anyway, it's good to see you. We're going to catch up in person later on in this week, aren't we? And maybe grab a beer, which is good because we've not done that for a while. Shall we get the guests on?
Do it.
Hello, both. How are you? I don't know who to ask to introduce themselves first. So, do you want to fight it out amongst yourselves?
That was a quick one. Um, all right, I'll go first then. I'm Wave. I'm Wave Crookes. I am one of the founders and directors of a company called SeaGrown up in Scarborough, and we're an offshore kelp farming company of all things.
And before we get Craig on, the wave and the sea thing, that's entirely coincidental, is it? Or have you picked a name later in life to kind of reflect the work that you do?
No, I haven't actually. I'm not like Sting or anybody like that. My name is actually Waveney.
Okay.
The full version is Waveney. I always wanted to be a butcher, but with a name like Wave, there was no chance of that. So I had to start a seaweed farm instead. So, so here we are today. No, that is actually my real name. Yeah.
It's just it's one of those normative. Oh, I can't even say it. Normative determinatives. Oh no, Gwilym knows what I'm trying to say.
Nominative determinism. That's the
That's
one.
the one. That's the one. I do struggle with long
Yeah,
words.
it really is. It's a good example of that, I think.
Yeah. If only Craig was called something like C or some such thing. But you're not Craig. Hello, Craig. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Lee. Hi, Gwilym. So I'm Craig Morrison. I'm a patent attorney in the engineering team at HGF in our York office, so not far from Scarborough, where Wave is. So I've been working with SeaGrown and Wave and the rest of the team on their IP for the past year or so.
Sounds really exciting.
It's a shame you're not called Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah, much better than my poor attempt. I was trying to keep the C thing going, but you're right. Yeah. Where do we start? So we should say that this is part of a series of podcasts we're doing around Earthshot. CIPA is a nominating organisation for Earthshot, and this is one of our nominations this year. So well done for that. We're really excited to see where this goes. We've got a good track record with getting nominees through to the final. So fingers crossed for you guys. Wave, where does it all start?
Well, it started for us at SeaGrown. It started back in 2016, I'm going to say. At that point, I was working for the British Antarctic Survey as a navigator on a polar research ship called the James Clark Ross. And I was pootling around in Antarctica in my ship. And the science teams we used to get coming down there changed out every sort of 4 or 6 weeks or something. And this particular team joined, and one of the senior scientists was Professor Laura Robinson. We met down in Antarctica, and when we got back to the UK, we got our heads together, and we want to start a business really that put our expertise, our professional knowledge together, and would avoid having to go in the dark on the ice for 9 months out of every year to do something slightly different. So we had marine operations, subsea operations, and marine science on the table. And if you try and find a business that needs all those skills, seaweed farming is a pretty good one. So we started that. We started the actual business itself, SeaGrown, in 2018, founded the company. Had to do a load of research. Probably the first year or so was research into why seaweed, how seaweed, where seaweed, and all the rest of it. What's it for? So we did that. We started the business up, and quick as a flash, COVID happened. So we, like everybody else, we all slowed down. But by this time, we did have the crucial thing for a seaweed farmer, which is a marine license. You need a marine license to farm the sea, basically. So we got a marine license in the North Sea, and we managed to start seaweed farming just before COVID, and we managed to carry on all the way through it. And we made some quite rapid developments with it, and we've been innovating right since then, really, at sort of into how to farm seaweed in offshore waters. And here we are today as a company of about 30 people, just over 30 people. We've got 3 vessels now, and we're farming a 65, 66 acre site off the Yorkshire coast out in the North Sea all year round, growing 3 different types of kelp. So, as they say, all the rest is history.
So the sea fisherman in me is sat here thinking, do we really need to farm seaweed? There seems to be a huge amount of it anyway. I spend more time pulling seaweed out the sea than I spend pulling fish out the sea. So you guys are focused on particular varieties of seaweed, I imagine.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I used to be a commercial fisherman myself, a trawlerman, and we've all been slithering around on rocks on seaweed when we were kids or even as adults for most of our lives. And you think, well, it's just a smelly, messy, thing that gets in your way, really. But it isn't. I thought exactly the same as you did, Lee, before we started SeaGrown. But really quickly, you don't have to look very far, in fact, to find that it's actually a vital thing for many, many different purposes. I think not only does it, when it grows, it does some really useful things. So by seaweed farming, we can benefit the environment. And it does this in lots of different ways. It's taking in lots and lots of carbon dioxide out the atmosphere when it grows. Because like any other plant, it takes in carbon dioxide. But in seaweed's case, it takes a lot of it in. And the scientists, and I hasten to add, I am not a scientist, I am a sailor. But the scientists tell me it's 2 to 3 times as quick or 2 to 3 times quicker than woodland or shore-based climate crops can do it. And that's, I think, because it grows so fast. It's really, really fast-growing stuff. So it's hoovering loads of carbon dioxide out the atmosphere as it grows, and it's releasing oxygen into the water. So the carbon dioxide uptake benefits all of us. We all know that we need to lose quite a lot of carbon quite quickly. And the oxygenating the seawater benefits all the things that live in the seawater. Yeah. So on top of that, it's taking out excess nutrients that are in the water. So things like nitrogen that washes down rivers and off the land, agricultural runoff, that sort of thing. Don't really want too much of that in the seawater. It upsets the balance of things. So the seaweed can take that out, which is another bonus. And if we farm it, the infrastructure that we put in to do the farming means we're creating artificial habitat, which can increase biodiversity, marine biodiversity. We get little things living on the blades of the seaweed as it grows. Bigger things eat those, fish eat those, mammals, birds eat those, and so we go on. Same on the seafloor for crustaceans and lobsters, crabs, and that sort of thing. So it does loads of good things for the environment, but we can also use it to do some quite smart stuff as well. And in fact, one of the things, the actual winner of the Earthshot Prize last year was a company called Notpla.
And I was going to ask you this. This is an obvious question.
Yeah, absolutely. I was amazed. But they're using seaweed derivatives to make plastic, biodegradable plastic, so that when that eventually, which it will, ends up in the sea again, it's going to disappear from whence it came. And that's absolutely ideal. I think we all want that. We've all seen Sir David Attenborough and his Blue Planet. Laura and I have worked down in Antarctica doing all sorts of scientific research, and the scientists down there have found plastic in the innards of critters that live right down on the bottom of the Weddell Sea, which is one of the most remote areas on Earth. So if it's there, it's everywhere, right? So We can do with biodegradable plastics, but we can make animal feeds that cut down greenhouse gas emissions, or allegedly do. That's been worked on at the moment. We can use it for human food, biochemicals, textiles, any number of different industrial uses. But a lot of these things are the grand industrial challenges that we're trying to address now, like food security, energy security, biodiversity increase, that sort of thing. So yeah, it is smelly and it is slippery and you do fall over it on beaches, but it's also quite smart stuff, and it's got some really current and topical uses.
Now, I'm guessing that your challenges to farm it are different to land agriculture, in that you're not needing to inject all of those resources. You don't need to till the land. You don't need to prep it or anything like that. So, so what are the distinctions? What's different about farming the sea?
It's very, very difficult is the first thing I would say. It's not an easy thing to do. It's constantly moving. It's an ever-changing environment. So if you put something down at sea and don't do it right, definitely not going to be where you left it next time you're looking for it. It's going to wash away. So you've got to know what you're doing. And to do this, we've got to use quite heavy weights, quite, weighty equipment. And for that, we need quite a big boat. If you've got a big boat, you need a trained crew, which are all fully certified and qualified and experienced. And also, nobody's doing this.
Really?
It's a new industry in the UK. And I mean, there are people doing it, but they're not doing it where we do it, which is right out.
So why is that? Is it because it is so demanding, so challenging? Why now? Why is now the right time?
Well, we need seaweed. Seaweed's going to make the world a better place for all the reasons I've just mentioned. I think if we're going to decarbonise properly, it's got to be part of that picture. And biodiversity, marine biodiversity is suffering when, for instance, our demand for renewable energy means that we're installing wind farms, offshore wind farms, all around the coast of the UK. While we're doing that, we are reducing biodiversity. And I know that nobody's keener than the offshore wind industry to make sure that this is fixed. So we do need, seaweed farming can fix this, and we do need to do that. And all the other things I've already mentioned about carbon dioxide and, oxygenating water, etc. It's a hard thing to do, because if you want to get to scale with this and do it, with any sort of impact, you've got to do it offshore, because the offshore areas are big. The inshore areas are obviously geographically constrained. You can only go as far as the cliffs, basically, if you're in an inlet or a shallow bay. It's easier to do.
And presumably also busy. There are people there,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's really difficult to get licensing because you need a marine license to do this. If you want to pick a quite sheltered, popular inshore area in somewhere like on the south coast of England, for instance, it's really busy. There's any number of different water users wanting to get in the same space. So if we push offshore, the areas are bigger, the competition is less, and we can get the industry right up to scale. But there's the rub. We can't get it to scale because the existing technology for farming seaweed does not work offshore. We tried it, actually. I know it doesn't work because we tried it. We tried it, the old traditional way, which is big, long lines strung out horizontally with seed on them. Seaweed grows and you pull the line up and basically harvest the seaweed off it, whatever way you can. So it's crying out for a different... We put 3 or 4 of these into our farm site, and maybe one of them at least was only 3 weeks old when it got ripped in half by the North Sea and dumped in 2 piles on the seabed. And we had to grapnel it back off the seabed, get it on deck, untangle both piles, and we basically went right back to square one and reinvented it from the ground up. So we've invented a system now that will work in an open water environment. It uses a fraction of the equipment that you need for one long line. So a long line's about 200-ish meters long, and it needs a pattern of anchors, a field of buoys on the surface, all kinds of shackles and chain and things to achieve about 200 meters of growth line, seeded line. With our system, we need 1 anchor, 1 buoy, and 1 mooring riser, and we can concentrate more than the 200 meters into 1 modular unit. And that modular unit works offshore in all weathers. And we know this because we've had them offshore in the North Sea for, I think, 2 winters now. And obviously it's summer as we record this, but it'll be the 3rd winter that we're going into after we finish this summer, whenever that actually happens, of course. But yeah, it's really, really resistant to bad weather. You can lay these, you don't need it to be straight, so it doesn't take out a big long swathe of seabed like a long line does, because a long line's anchored at both ends and you can't drive over it. You've got to go around it. These things are single points, so you can approach them from any direction.
Are they just to get my simple brain working here? Are they up down and then not long?
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They're up down. They are. They're like the vertical moorings, like buoys.
Yeah,
The navigation buoy.
Yeah.
You see the buoy on the surface. There's a riser that comes up from the seabed and an anchor on the seabed, similar to that. But it's got a little a piece of kit just below the surface that the seaweed grows on.
Gotcha.
So you can drive around them in any direction. It means you can use them in the approaches to ports. We can put them in any configuration around coral reefs or merle beds or seagrass beds or whatever we like to protect seabed infrastructure. And that includes offshore energy, like oil pipelines or transmission cables or export cables for wind turbines. So we can lay them in any configuration. And that means that we can co-locate seaweed farming with other things like offshore energy.
Offshore,
like fishing grounds on areas of natural beauty, SSSIs, whatever you like. You can't do that with long lines. We can work I reckon we could probably work about 10 times faster using this system than we would do with long lines, because we've also automated it. We've got an automated seeding system and a handling system, a hydraulic handling system on the deck of our workboat, which is tailored to this particular piece of equipment. And we've yet to prove this, but I'm going to guess here now that it's going to be 10 times faster, if not more.
I want to go out and see this. I'm so excited.
It's good. It is good. There's nothing more satisfying than when we pull them out of the water and they're absolutely thick with seaweed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The time we saw that seaweed, it was through a microscope. It was just a pinhead seed. It's incredible. Yeah, it's really good. So we've got quite a nice little system here, and it keeps the crew safer, drier. We could work 24 hours a day if we wanted to, and we can work all year round because it can put up with the weather. So it's a step change. It's the difference between crawling around on your hands and knees with a trowel to try and farm something to moving on to the tractor, the seed drill, the combine.
Yeah, gotcha.
Fully automated it. So it's a good thing. We're quite pleased with it so far.
So I could keep this conversation going forever, but I know Gwilym. I can see he's champing at the bit to up-talk IP. So I'm going to have to let him in, and then that gets Craig in as well. So go on, mate, in you come.
Perfect.
Well, Craig, I was going to say, actually, fantastic client. Lucky you. I've got so many questions across the board, but actually, I'm going to stick with Wade. Just a couple more questions for you because I'm really interested. You mentioned Prof. Robinson, I think it was somebody you met on the Antarctic survey. Who's doing all the inventing here? It sounds like there's a really interesting mix of kind of marine expertise and biology, isn't it?
That's exactly right, Gwilym. Yeah, you need both. You need marine science and you need marine operational type skills to do this. So I've done the inventing on the sort of offshore, the workboat and the marine ops side. So all the in-water equipment, ropes, floats, anchors, shackles, that sort of thing, and the deck machinery. But to back that up, because we're now able to work so far off, so fast, and so efficiently, we need more seed. And one of the big blockers to the industry has been producing that seed material. So that is where the brainier folk than I come in and do the complicated stuff, which is produce that seed in enough bulk and density so that we can get enough seed onto these rigs and grow all the seaweed that we are. We need to sort of up the ante on that area as well. And that is where Professor Laura Robinson and her team come in and provide what we need to take it to sea and grow it.
She must be chuffed to meet you, actually, because it sounds like between you, you've got everything you need. But if you haven't met each other, then it's quite an unusual mix of kind of expertise.
Yeah, we get on quite well. I actually married her, so it works in many different ways.
Oh, brilliant!
Excellent. Craig, I'd love to see what your AAU looks like with that relationship behind your inventors. But
hang on, you can't throw an initialism in without explaining it.
Assignment, acknowledgement, and undertaking. It's a little thing you tend to do before you get things filed. It's kind of a prenup, which is incredibly relevant here. But anyway, Craig. So this, as I say, what a fantastic client to have. Level. I've got one great proper nerdy question in a minute, but just want to take us through the IP story, the patent story first of all, because obviously it's been quite fun.
Yeah. So an attorney at HGF met Wave and his team at an event a few years ago. And at that time, SeaGrown, they were in the sort of first iteration of their design. So they had the concept was there already. So we helped draft and file an initial application to that core design. And that's sort of working its way through the system at the moment. We've got a pending PCT application for that. And then Wave came back to us not long after that with a quite comprehensive redesign, based on the core concept, but with a lot of improvements, much better, much more efficient, much more focused on the, as he said, the on-deck handling and processing system. So we've got a couple of follow-on applications to the improvements and to the on-deck handling system as well. We've not had any published yet, so we're still at that sort of early stage of getting things through to grant. But we've got the core IPs is there being registered. We've also got some trademarks. SeaGrown are very, very good at naming their products as well. So we've got that's the branding side of it as well. But yeah, an excellent client to work for. Really, really enjoying it. Not many clients that will take you out on a boat.
Oh, Lee, I know. Okay, we're getting jealous now. This is, yeah, that's cool. I think the nerdy question actually. Sorry, everybody. This is for the patent attorneys listening in. There's an offshore element that's always interesting to catch with the patent system. I mean, are you just not bothering with trying to stop people in the sea? It's all about what's happening on land, or how does that all work?
Yeah. I mean, this is getting increasingly relevant with offshore wind energy, and there's some recent UK case law about this, like territorial waters, things like that. Ultimately, you need protect. They're going to be made somewhere. It might be that people operating these things land within territorial waters, which are covered in certain jurisdictions, and then you capture infringement that way. But yeah, there's that element which always makes things interesting. We always advise that you're better to have the protection than not. These things will be made somewhere. They'll be used somewhere. So.
And I mean, I was thinking about hearing the growth story kind of underpinning this. I mean, I think you said 3 ships and 30, was it 30 people as well or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 30, just over now, actually. Yeah.
Huge, loads and loads of plants. You've got all kinds of bits and pieces. Not plants, or plants grow on the plant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Loads of bits and pieces. There's a lot of capital in that. There's a lot of investment in that. How are you raising that? And hopefully the IP is helping on that front as well.
Well, so far, we've been really lucky in that it used to be called BEIS, BEIS. Now they've changed their name to DESNES, Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Well, because of the environmental credentials of seaweed in the sort of carbon and the biomass, the UK needs biomass to achieve these targets and hit these grand industrial challenges that we keep hearing about. The only marine biomass project that is in the government's net zero portfolio is our system here, the Fathom system. So we are contracted to government to produce this system, to commercialise this system, and then roll it out commercially after a 3-year development cycle, which we're in year 2 of now. And when we do that, we'll be taking it to other seaweed farmers in the UK so that we can leverage biomass seaweed, marine biomass production. And that's the point here. SeaGrown don't want to be the seaweed kings of Britain, but we have got a system that can allow somebody else to be, and somebody else to be, and somebody else to be still. So we can absolutely supercharge the amount of seaweed that we're able to produce and leverage the benefits that will provide in terms of employment and in terms of environmental and a useful commodity for industry. So that's what the government are interested in. And obviously we need to commercialise this because we have a company to run, and the IP is a key aspect of that. From a commercial point of view, we're looking at future investment into this. I mean, environmental and ethical investment at the moment is pretty hot property. So I think for future investment purposes, if we've got a sort of extensive protection suite already in place and we own the IP, it only makes it more attractive a proposition for future investors, and it's a commercial gain for the company. So we're happy to be investing time and money into it at this stage as we develop it, really. You're right to say that anybody could sort of throw something in the sea and grow some seaweed. They could copy this. That is true. It's very difficult to sort of protect from that. The blocker there is the capital outlay and the market. The market for seaweed. If you're not actually a seaweed producer, what are you going to do with your ton of wet kelp? It's quite tricky. People have asked me, what are you going to do if somebody goes and steals your equipment offshore? Well, I mean, good luck, because it's really quite heavy and big. You'd need a decent boat with a crane and all sorts of kit on it to lift it. What are you going to do with the seaweed that's growing on it? We have a market, but that's because we're a seaweed company. So I think that there are natural, policing mechanisms that will prevent most of this. But obviously, there is a risk that we might get infringement in the future. We can't protect against everything. We're just trying to do the logical things as advised by Craig at HGF, and get a solider foundation as we can before we take this commercially.
And Craig, is that some licensing model then? Is that the that kind of end point.
Yeah, and I think the Wave's been they came to us with a very clear business plan right from the start, that they were developing this tech and that they plan on using it themselves and farming, but ultimately the end game is to license this out as far afield as they possibly can. So the IP is really important to that. And we've already mentioned that the 3-year funding plan. So as part of that, there's sort of a structure, an IP spend for each year. And so the licensing phase will be coming into that over the next year or so. So we've already had discussions about how best to that. But up until now, it's been getting all the IP ducks in a row to make sure that it's there for when they want to start commercialize and license this out to farmers around the world.
Which was my next question about the international level of interest. I mean, you mentioned PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty, International Patent Application, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, gives you the option on 140-something countries or wherever it is. You got global interest in this?
Yes, we have. In fact, yeah, I mean, without betraying any confidentialities, we've had inquiries from pretty much all corners of the world. The value of seaweed and marine biomass is not a new thing. We haven't invented it. It's widely known how beneficial this is. And seaweed farming is topical at the moment because we can deliver all these benefits without using any of the things that we're short of. And that would be fresh water, power, chemicals, pesticides, that sort of thing. But the kicker is land. We don't need any land to produce useful stuff. And the world knows this, but the world doesn't yet have any, or many, if any, workable at commercial scale and reliable, repeatable, accredited offshore systems to exploit these offshore areas. So yeah, we've had many inquiries from around the world, but we've got I think more from around the UK to deal with first, but we have global ambitions, and I think if we can take this to the world and allow everybody to farm more seaweed, then it'll just make the world a better place and at least put the brakes on as best we can the effects of climate change, which we're seeing all the time, aren't we? As I said, I'm not a climate scientist of any sort, but I do watch the news. And I'm able to make a view. It seems that something needs to be done. And if we can help by farming seaweed, let's let everybody do it and create an actual industry.
And presumably, particularly in terms of your relationship with government, which I know can be quite fragile around ecological kind of concerns, as we're seeing with energy at the moment and the government sort of shifting course, you're in a relatively safe space, aren't you? You're not creating energy. So you're not stuck in that bit. You're just doing something that's good.
Yeah, we've been looking quite hard. We really are genuinely trying to find the downside here. We've thought what could be. There'll be a downside somewhere. But we're able to make something good. And while it's being made, it's doing something good. And it's creating jobs in areas where we need them, which I don't know if any of you do live on the coast, but some of these coastal towns, Scarborough included, they can be quite deprived areas. And, technical skilled jobs are few and far between. So companies like this, and hopefully companies that we can help using our equipment to get set up elsewhere, we can create sustainable employment without actually causing too much of a downside. We are looking for it, but we haven't found it yet.
Yeah, so I'm Portsmouth lad. I still live just outside of Portsmouth. So, there's a place that 20 years ago had the kind of the dockyard ripped out of its heart, and yet kind of the sea is our life. It
is.
Yeah.
I know Portsmouth very well, actually. Yeah, I used to be in the Navy myself. And you're right, the dockyard and the sort of waterfront area was the hub of the whole place.
Yeah.
So there is still areas of deprivation in places like Portsmouth and Southampton, which are major ports. So, if we can create these new jobs in the blue economy and put the UK on the map as a producer of equipment to allow other countries, India, Seychelles, wherever, Mauritius, to do the same thing and try and put the brakes on climate change, then I think it's a good place to be in. Yeah, it's a good sector to be in.
Well, any more IP questions?
That's something between IP and business to do with, there's a huge scalability about what you're talking about. The design you described kind of demonstrates that scalability. I mean, presumably there comes a point where you need to be, there'll come a point where you're recovering enough seaweed to absolutely pay off all the costs. Are you there yet? How big do you have to get before it becomes kind of a net positive financial system?
Well, our site is, if you like, the test bed for this. We're working out the sort of economics of it as we design. And that involves the transition between getting a great guy called Pete, who's got a welding shop in Scarborough, making a lot of our kit, we need to transition that into more of a sort of scaled manufacturing model, and that's going to be coming in the near future, in the next sort of 6 months to a year, when we go from pilot scale up to sort of medium scale. The economic model will be such that we'll know how much this kit will cost, and it will give time for return on it. We'll be able to provide a financial model to a prospective farmer, and that will include forecasts. Given X yield, you will get a return on investment in Y months, or years, whatever it might be, depending on the scale. And the whole thing will be sort of underpinned by an app, if you like, a digital system whereby people can pull consultation or services or innovation or yield predictions or any services that SeaGrown that we can impart via our own expertise to help these farmers get these farms off the ground. And part of that may be that we can aggregate markets, and we can be a one-stop shop for the supply of seaweed. So if a farmer at small scale grows seaweed, we may offer a buyback scheme, and there's his investment being paid off because we already have contacts in the seaweed markets that they don't have. So I think that there's ways we can manage this. It's going to come in the final year of the project, and when we take it to market, it'll be a viable financial proposition for large and small farmers, and that's in the UK and worldwide. Because bearing in mind, a lot of these places where we may target this, so they can create a little sustainable industry of their own, maybe in third world nations, they're not going to have a lot of financial resource and fancy kit. We need to pitch this high in terms of big operators, perhaps offshore wind, perhaps others, and also scale it down for a small fishing vessel, a third world nation, people that just want to do this. We're going to make it accessible for all, and that's the aim of this, really.
So one final kind of patentation question, probably starting with you, Craig. Just have interest on the technology. It's unpublished, so obviously, let's keep you decide how much to say, but it sounds like it's more mechanical at the moment. It's the kind of the marine engineering aspect. But do you see yourselves slipping also into the marine biology side as well? Where do you see that going?
So at the moment, yeah, the applications are very much on the mechanical side. So the structure of the modular system itself, and then the on-deck processing, handling, seeding system. So very much on the mechanical side at the moment, which I like. But I know that Wave and his team are doing a lot more than just that. They're doing a lot more of the research and development on the seaweed itself, as he alluded to before, the seeds and that sort of thing. So I'm excited to see what they come up with next, and I imagine that it will stray outside the purely mechanical areas as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Craig. You're exactly right. We need, it's underpinned by marine biology and marine science. We've got to come up with the seed material at volume and at the correct composition to allow us to grow this seaweed as quickly as possible. All we're doing on the marine engineering side is giving it the platform to do that, really. So the next big push we're going to be having is on seed production and hatchery services. And that's where, as I said, the scientific side of the business will come into its own. And we'll be having a chat with Craig about something different to, rope and shackles and winches.
Where did the idea for the Earthshot nomination at this point in time come from? Was that from your perspective, Craig? Was that kind of like, now's the time to do this?
Yeah. So I'd seen last year the CIPA's involvement with the Earthshot Prize, so Nopal are doing very well with a seaweed-based product. So when the sort of call came around this year for CIPA nominees, SeaGrown just seemed to be the perfect candidate. It was myself and one of my colleagues sort of independently thought, yeah, we've got to raise this with Wave and see what he thinks, because at the moment at the stage they're at in terms of commercialization and ready to scale and all these things, they seem to be exactly what Earthshot is trying to champion. So raised it with Wave, and he was very happy for us to put them forward, and that's where we are now.
It's worth pointing out as well, actually, that there was a recent report done on the global seaweed industry, because it's starting to attract the attention of big finance houses, and international investors. The overwhelming majority, and I'm not going to quote a figure here, but I'm talking like north of 80%. Of the investment that comes into seaweed is in processing and developing of seaweed products, not in actually producing the seaweed itself. You can't produce it. We can process it. We can make clever stuff from it. but we need to actually grow the stuff first. We've got to sort of walk before we can run. And there is a huge gap that needs filling to allow not just UK, but worldwide to grow enough seaweed to do all the clever things that people are really keen to invest in. We've got to grow the stuff first. And I think that's the space that SeaGrown are in. We can really help with that. And it's an end-to-end system. You, as long as you've got access to the sea and a means of working the equipment, like a small boat of some sort, we can help you to grow seaweed. And that's what we need to do for the NOPLAs of this world to come up with the clever uses for it.
That's amazing. That's, for me, that's been the great thing about this particular podcast, because I'm sitting here thinking, I see how all this connects. We've done a lot of these Earthshot ones, and they're all sort of brilliant stories in their own right. This one for me is like really sexy because I can see how it kind of links into everything else. might not be the right word. We might take that one out. Who knows?
It's a good job people can't see this. They're just hearing it. Otherwise, they'd know how wrong you were.
Wave, are you sat there thinking, "Oh, I wish they'd asked me that"? Is there anything we've not covered?
No. I think that was a really good overview, gents. I think that was a good discussion, a canter through what we do for a living. Yeah. It's quite an involved subject, so I mean, keeping it fairly sort of overview level is good. But we're trying to make the world a better place by growing more seaweed. It's as simple as that. I think
it'd be great to do this one again in about a year's time when you guys have through the kind of like the proving phase and it's starting to scale. So we may well become.
It's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah. Good luck for the shots. Fingers crossed. I can't remember exactly when the finalists are announced, but it can't be terribly far off now. So fingers crossed for that. Before we close, though, we do always try and end the podcast on some kind of tangentially related question, and that's always my job to come up with that. So I've been sat here scratching my head. Gwilym did ping one at me, and he did say, should we make the closing question, what should you do with a ton of kelp? Wet kelp, but you know the answer to that, Wave, and we don't. So, so here's my clever closer. Then I go to Gwilym first, and then we kind of like go around all of us. So Gwilym, I don't actually know how much of a kind of like seafaring person you are. So we've never had this conversation before. What's the most interesting thing you've ever pulled out of the sea, or if you can't answer that question, just a nice interesting story that connects you to the sea?
No, I can actually answer that exact question. I've got quite a cool story. When I was a kid, used to live abroad, and we used to go on really cool holidays because we were in Asia. So I went to the Maldives before it was quite so developed, and we were on an island that really was quite undeveloped. And we went on an overnight fishing trip. We sat on an open boat, and you were sea fishing and everything. And I caught fish. Everyone was really excited. I actually caught something quite big and wriggly. But it's dark, and I think it was raining possibly. And we went back, and we had a look at it, and it looked like some weird, super deep subterranean fish from a long way down. It was really
subterranean.
What's the word for undersea? Subterranean. Deep. Submarine. That's a good word. They should use that more. Yeah, submarine. I don't know where it came from. They know all the people on the boat have no idea what that is. That is a really strange looking dinosaur of a fish. And we left it overnight. They had a kind of a little closed off bit, that's pretty weird for that as well, in the sea. And they chucked it in there, but it had been eaten by the time we got up to go and look at it again. So I still know what it was, but it's really cool, very memorable, kind of quite cool night. Pulling a dinosaur, I'm convinced it was a dinosaur, pulling a dinosaur up.
Coelacanth or something like that.
That's the kind, I couldn't say it, but that's kind of what I meant, yeah. It was probably a carp, but I don't know, whatever.
A carp from the sea, yeah, maybe. Craig, how about you? I'm coming to Wave last because he's going to have the best story to tell, obviously.
Yeah, I've never done sea fishing before, but I have done some I went to the west coast of America a good few years ago now, and we did some boat trips out, and we saw blue whales breaching out of the water, which was just amazing, brilliant experience. So that's probably the most impressive thing I've seen come out of the sea.
Don't get a lot better than a blue whale, does it, I suppose?
Yeah.
Can't Wave, you've probably got tons, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a few examples, and I feel like I've got a bit of a head start on this one, so I'm a little bit guilty about that. But no, I think the best thing I've ever pulled out of the sea was when I used to be a deep sea diver in the oil and gas industry, and my first ever.
Sorry to interrupt, but if you just do another podcast just about the 96 scholarship, that'd be cool.
Yeah, and the first, after leaving the Navy, the first deep dive I ever did was a salvage job and unfortunately a body recovery job on a sunken Spanish trawler. off the northwest corner of Spain, La Coruña. It sank in some strange circumstances. Nobody knew, and we had to go and take film and video and rescue a few unfortunately deceased people and some kit. And the supervisor was talking in my comms in my helmet, saying, "Oh, just go to the bridge of the vessel and take a video of what time it says on the clock, what the position of the control levers for the engines are, and that sort of thing. And if you see a briefcase lying around, get hold of that." So I did. I did all the officialdom and got hold of the logs and looked at the clocks. Found the briefcase under the skipper's bunk at the back of the bridge. And, oh yeah, I've got this. Is this the briefcase? Yes, that's the briefcase. Take it to the crane basket and lash it to death. So make sure it's not going to come out. And they hauled it up to the surface, and it had 200,000 euro in it, because the vessel had been cashing its catch, and they were going to split that money when they got back to port, presumably in northwest Spain. But they wanted it because there was a big political campaign to pay out the families of the deceased, and they were going to use this money to do that. So if we hadn't found it, I think that would have been a bit of it was a bad day for them anyway, of course, but it's made it a slightly better day because they got some kind of payback for their loss. So that's probably the most valuable thing I've ever pulled out the sea. But plenty of other ugly fish, though, I do agree.
If you could just cap that, Lee, that'd be great.
I can't top it. I've got it's quite an interesting one. I was out fishing on a mate's boat once, and we were heading out around the Needles, around the Isle of Wight, and there was a boat kind of coming back in. It was close enough to us that we could kind of have a shout and a chat, what's your luck been and stuff like that. And the guy said, I've lost my best rod. He said, with decent bite, it's gone straight off the boat. So we go out, we're fishing. I get a bite. It's a bloody heavy thing. I'm struggling to pull this thing, and what comes up first is a rod. Imagine it's this guy's rod, because I can't imagine there too many people have lost it. So I've pulled up this rod first, and then when I'm pulling the rod in, it's quite clear to me that the bite wasn't on my line; it's on this rod. So I've now got this other guy's rod that I'm now bringing in, and I'm bringing a 9-pound bass. Lovely, okay. That's coming home. That's being baked in the oven. So I get home that night at about 11, 12 o'clock, and I always like to prep my fish as soon as I get in, rather than doing them in the morning. So I'm on the sink in the kitchen, and I'm gutting this bass, and I open this bass up. And what comes out, not related to this guy, is a fully functional digital watch. So I have no idea how this poor old thing's been caught by a rod that's in the water, and at some point has swallowed a digital watch. The thing's coming out flashing at me like that. It's just... So yeah, nowhere near as good as Waves, but quite an interesting story.
Yeah, pretty good, I think, that one, definitely.
Wave, Craig, thank you so much for joining it. It's been an absolute delight. We're stoked with this podcast. This may be my new #1 podcast. Absolutely loved it. Really loved it. Best of luck for the Earthshot, but more importantly than that, just best of luck for the project, because I can see absolutely the importance of this. And maybe perhaps if we're still doing this podcast in a year or two's time, we'll get you back and find out how it's gone. Because this is great.
Brilliant. Delighted. Yeah, thanks. Nice talking to you guys. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye now.